My wife stages a fake domestic violence prank for fame, but her cruel lie backfires as I seek legal justice and end our toxic marriage forever. Driving down my driveway after a grueling day at work, the first thing I noticed were the flashing blue and red lights. 2 police cruisers were parked in front of my house, neighbors peering from behind curtains and front lawns. My stomach dropped instantly. Before I could even step out of my car, 2 officers approached, faces stern and hands hovering near their belts. "Sir, we need you to step out of the vehicle with your hands where we can see them." Their tone left no room for questions. My mind raced through a mental inventory of anything I might have done wrong. A speeding ticket, forgotten paperwork, nothing came to mind. "Officers, what's this about?" I asked as calmly as possible, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "We received a report of domestic violence at this address," one officer stated flatly. "Please step out of the vehicle now." The words hit me like a physical blow. Domestic violence? I lived with only my wife of 3 years, and we'd never had any physical altercations. This had to be a mistake. What happened next plays in my memory like a nightmare in slow motion. Hands against my car, the cold metal of handcuffs clicking around my wrists, being read my rights in full view of the entire neighborhood. The ultimate humiliation of being escorted to the police car while trying to maintain whatever dignity I had left. "My wife must be inside. There's been a misunderstanding," I pleaded. "Can someone please check on her? This doesn't make any sense." The confusion on the officers' faces should have been my first clue. When we approached my front door, it swung open to reveal my wife, not injured or distressed, but holding her phone up, recording the entire scene with a smile on her face. "Gotcha," she exclaimed, laughing as if this were the punchline to the world's funniest joke. "You should see your face right now." The officers' expressions changed from confusion to annoyed realization. This wasn't the first false call they'd responded to, but perhaps the first orchestrated as a prank between spouses. After a tense conversation inside, away from the neighbors' prying eyes, the truth emerged. My wife had called in a false report, complete with convincing tears and acting, all for what she called a viral prank video for her social media. The officers were far from amused. They explained the seriousness of filing false reports, how resources had been diverted from real emergencies, and how this prank could have ended very differently had I reacted poorly to being suddenly confronted by police. They left without arresting either of us, but their parting words to my wife were clear. She was getting a warning this time, but false reporting was a crime that could result in serious consequences. When the door closed behind them, the silence in our house was deafening. My wrists still bore the red marks from the handcuffs, my professional reputation in the neighborhood likely in tatters. And there stood my wife reviewing the footage on her phone, apparently oblivious to what she had just put me through. "That was amazing. The look on your face. This is definitely going viral," she said, swiping through filters for her video. I stared at her, unable to process how the woman I married could be so disconnected from the severity of what she'd done. This wasn't just crossing a boundary, this was demolishing it, along with my trust, dignity, and sense of safety in my own home. "You need to delete that video now," I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. "What you did wasn't a prank. It was cruel and it was illegal." Her dismissive eye roll told me everything I needed to know about where her priorities lay. "Don't be so dramatic. It was just a joke." As I walked upstairs to shower away the experience, one thought crystallized in my mind. This marriage wasn't what I thought it was, and neither was the woman I had married. What I didn't tell her, what I kept to myself as I let the hot water wash over me, was that this wouldn't stand. I wouldn't seek revenge in the heat of emotion. No, this required something more calculated, more just, and completely, unquestionably legal. The morning after the prank, I came downstairs to find her casually scrolling through her phone at the kitchen table, coffee in hand. The video of my humiliation had already been posted online. Comments were pouring in, some expressing shock, others laughing along, a few concerned voices questioning whether this crossed a line. Those comments she'd simply dismissed with laughing emojis. "Morning. The video already has over 2,000 views," she announced proudly, not even looking up from her screen. No apology, no recognition of the damage done, just metrics and engagement statistics. I poured myself coffee and sat across from her. The woman before me suddenly seemed like a stranger. We'd been married 3 years, together for 5, and never once had I glimpsed this callous disregard for boundaries, or perhaps I'd simply ignored the warning signs. dismissing smaller pranks as harmless fun rather than the red flags they were. "We need to talk about what happened yesterday," I said, keeping my voice level. "You filed a false police report." "That's a crime, not a prank." She finally looked up, rolling her eyes. "They didn't charge me with anything. The cops understood it was just for fun." "No, they gave you a warning." "There's a difference." I took a deep breath. "Do you have any idea what that did to me? Being handcuffed in front of our neighbors, having people think I'm some kind of abuser?" The look she gave me was one I'll never forget, a mixture of boredom and mild annoyance, as if I were overreacting to a minor inconvenience rather than public humiliation and a potential criminal record. "Everyone knows it was a joke now. If anything, this makes you more interesting in the neighborhood. You should be thanking me." She returned to her phone, the conversation apparently over in her mind. That dismissal lit something inside me, not an explosive anger, but a cold, calculating clarity. I excused myself to shower and get ready for work, but my mind was already working through possibilities. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a glimpse into her character, and I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. At work, I couldn't focus. Colleagues noticed my distraction, but I blamed it on a poor night's sleep. During lunch, I stepped out to a nearby park and made 2 phone calls. The first was to a lawyer friend, asking hypothetically about the legal consequences of filing false police reports in our state. The second was to a locksmith to quietly change the passwords on our shared cloud accounts. What my wife didn't realize was that her social media prank had created a perfect, time-stamped record of her false report. Her own video included her confession that she had deliberately lied to the police. She had captured the officer's warnings on camera and had documented my clear lack of consent to any of it. That evening, I stopped at an electronics store and purchased a small digital voice recorder, not for anything dramatic, simply to ensure that any future conversations about the incident were documented. I wasn't planning revenge, I was building protection. When I returned home, she was hosting a video call with her friends, laughingly recounting the prank while embellishing details to make it even more humiliating. I heard her through the office door describing my pathetic face when the handcuffs went on, how I practically begged the officers. None of it true. All of it designed to elevate her social standing at my expense. I quietly closed the front door again and took a walk around the neighborhood. 3 separate neighbors who saw me quickly found reasons to cross the street or retreat into their homes. In their eyes, despite the prank revelation, a seed of doubt had been planted. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Isn't that what people think? By the time I returned, her call had ended. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner as if nothing had happened, as if our life together hadn't fundamentally changed. "I think I'm going to make this a series," she announced as I entered. "People love the relationship prank content." My follower count jumped by almost 1,000 overnight. That's when I knew this wasn't just about one incident. This was about who she truly was. Someone willing to sacrifice my dignity, reputation, and potentially my freedom for likes and follows. Someone who saw nothing wrong with using false accusations as entertainment. "What other pranks are you thinking about?" I asked, forcing curiosity into my voice while activating the recorder in my pocket. As she enthusiastically outlined increasingly invasive and potentially illegal prank ideas, I nodded along, asking questions that allowed her to elaborate. With each word, she was giving me exactly what I needed, evidence of premeditation and malicious intent. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning justice, and thanks to her own eagerness to share her plans, she was handing me the blueprint for exactly how to achieve it. The following week, I took a long lunch break and drove downtown to meet with a lawyer. Not my friend who did given advice over the phone, but a professional who specialized in criminal defense and family law. I needed expert guidance from someone with no personal connection to either of us. The office was modest but professional, walls lined with legal texts and credentials. The attorney listened intently as I explained the situation, occasionally jotting notes but mostly maintaining eye contact as I detailed the false police report, the social media posts, and the cavalier attitude toward potentially ruining my reputation. "What you're describing isn't just a relationship problem," she said when I finished. "Filing a false police report is a criminal offense in this state, punishable by up to 6 months in jail and substantial fines. The fact that she recorded herself admitting to it and then published that admission online." She shook her head. "That's not just foolish. It's practically building the prosecution's case for them." "I don't want her to go to jail," I clarified. I just need to protect myself, and maybe make sure she understands the gravity of what she did. The attorney leaned forward. What exactly are you looking to accomplish here? I thought carefully before answering. 3 things. First, I want the video and all references to it removed from social media. Second, I want her to understand that actions have consequences, real ones, not just relationship drama. And third, I paused, the reality of what I was contemplating finally sinking in. I want out of this marriage with my reputation intact. She nodded, understanding the subtext. I recommend documenting everything moving forward. Every conversation about the incident, every social media post she makes about it, every interaction with neighbors or friends where it comes up. Keep a journal with dates and times, forward me copies of the videos she's posted, and don't tell her you're speaking with me. I left with a retainer agreement and a strange sense of calm. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice and self-preservation. At home, I created a secure email account accessible only from my work computer and began forwarding evidence, screenshots of her social media posts, screen recordings of the videos, transcripts of conversations I'd recorded. Our state allowed single-party consent. Comments from her followers encouraging more pranks, and her enthusiastic responses promising escalation. What struck me most was how quickly she'd moved on, seemingly unaffected by the incident while I was left dealing with the fallout. When I picked up groceries, the cashier, a neighbor's college-age son, avoided eye contact. My usual morning wave to the jogger across the street was no longer returned. Small changes, but significant ones. Meanwhile, she was riding high on her new social media attention. 3 days after posting the arrest video, she live-streamed herself taking my car without permission, claiming it had been stolen and filing a police report, stopping just short of actually submitting it after coincidentally finding the car in our driveway. Her audience ate it up, demanding more almost pranks that walked the line of legality. You're going to get us both in serious trouble, I said that evening, careful to have my recorder running. Relax, I'm not actually filing the reports. I'm just showing how far I could go, she laughed. Besides, the police wouldn't do anything even if I did. They know me now. They just roll their eyes and play along. The officers who came to our house specifically warned you about false reporting. They were just being dramatic, she waved dismissively. Everyone loves a good prank video. Even my mother called to say she thought it was hilarious. I made a mental note to contact my mother-in-law. If she was encouraging this behavior, she needed to understand its implications too. That night, I couldn't sleep. The woman beside me had become unpredictable. Someone who viewed the destruction of my reputation as collateral damage in her quest for internet fame. I realized with startling clarity that I no longer felt safe in my own home. Not physically threatened, but psychologically vulnerable. What prank would she attempt next? What line would she cross? Would I wake up to more police at our door, or perhaps Child Protective Services responding to another false claim? The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. After she left for her job, I methodically went through our home office, scanning important documents and financial records. I transferred my personal portion of our joint savings to a new individual account, not hiding money, simply securing what was indisputably mine. Then I began reaching out to friends and family members who had commented positively on her videos, not confrontationally but with simple questions. Did you realize that filing false police reports is a criminal offense? Are you concerned about encouraging behavior that could result in criminal charges? I kept my tone curious rather than accusatory and forwarded screenshots of these exchanges to my attorney as well. By that afternoon, several comments had been deleted. One mutual friend called to express concern about the videos and my well-being. We thought you were in on it, she admitted. It never occurred to us that you were actually handcuffed without warning. That's not okay. The tide was beginning to turn as people recognized the difference between a harmless prank and potentially criminal behavior. As witnesses began to question her actions, they were unwittingly becoming part of my case, my protection against whatever might come next. 2 weeks after the incident, I initiated the next phase of my plan. While she was at a weekend brunch with friends, an outing I'd actually encouraged, I methodically separated our most important financial records and personal documents. Nothing hidden or stolen, simply organized into clear mine and hers categories and documented with photographs for my records. The previous night, I'd set up a separate bank account at a different institution and transferred my latest paycheck there instead of our joint account. Again, Nothing suspicious or vindictive, just practical steps to establish financial independence I'd need for what came next. I made a series of carefully planned phone calls that afternoon, starting with her parents. We'd always had a good relationship, and I wanted to maintain that despite what was happening. I'm concerned about some choices she's been making lately, I explained carefully to her father, a retired judge who certainly understood the legal ramifications better than most. Have you seen her recent social media activities? His silence told me everything. He had seen them, and he was not impressed. Son, I raised her better than this, he finally said. Her mother and I have been discussing it. We were going to call you this week. That conversation yielded my first significant ally, someone whose opinion she valued and who understood intimately the potential consequences of false police reports. By the call's end, he promised to speak with her directly about the seriousness of her actions, not attacking her but expressing genuine concern about where this path might lead. My next calls were to our closest mutual friends, people we'd known for years, not to turn them against her but to make sure they understood my perspective. One by one, I explained the situation without embellishment or emotional manipulation, simply stating facts, the false police report, the public humiliation, the cavalier attitude toward potentially criminal behavior. We'd seen the videos, but we thought it was staged, admitted one friend. You know, like those couples who plan pranks together for content. You're saying you had no idea it was coming? None, I confirmed. The first I knew was when police officers approached my car with hands on their weapons. The stunned silence that followed told me they were finally understanding the reality of what had happened. By day's end, several friends had messaged her directly, expressing concern rather than the congratulatory comments she'd grown accustomed to. When she returned home that evening, her mood was noticeably different. Gone was the bubbling enthusiasm about her growing follower count. Instead, she moved through the house with quiet irritation, checking her phone frequently but not engaging with it as usual. My father called me today, she finally said as we prepared dinner. He seemed upset about something. Did you talk to him? I was careful with my response, keeping my voice neutral. He called me earlier asking about some posts he'd seen. I thought it was better if he heard what happened directly from you. What exactly did you tell him? The edge in her voice was unmistakable. The truth, that you called in a false police report as a prank, recorded my arrest and posted it online. I maintained eye contact, refusing to be made to feel as if I'd done something wrong by speaking honestly. It wasn't a false report, it was a joke. Everyone understands that except you. She stabbed at vegetables with unnecessary force. Now Melissa and Taylor are asking if I'm okay and if I need someone to talk to. They think I'm having some kind of breakdown because of whatever you said to them. I simply told them what happened. You're trying to make me look crazy, she snapped, turning my friends and family against me because you can't take a joke. I took a deliberate breath. Filing a false police report isn't a joke, it's a crime. The fact that you still don't see that is concerning. Whatever. She grabbed her plate and retreated to eat in the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. The next day, I noticed her social media activity had slowed dramatically. Her latest prank video had been quietly archived, no longer visible on her profile. Small victories, but significant ones. That afternoon, I received a call from her father again. We spoke with her last night, he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. She's not seeing reason on this. Keeps insisting it was just content and that you're overreacting. Her mother tried to explain how this could impact both your lives. He sighed deeply. I love my daughter, but she's making choices I can't support. What's your next step? I'd been dreading this question, but his obvious concern gave me the confidence to be honest. I've consulted with an attorney, I admitted. Not to pursue charges, but to understand my options and protect myself going forward. There was a long pause before he responded. I think that's wise. This isn't the daughter I raised, and actions have consequences. Whatever you need to do, I understand. That conversation, that blessing from her own father, was the final confirmation I needed. The stage was set, the evidence gathered, the support network established. It was time for the next phase of my plan. 1 month after the initial incident, I sat in the district attorney's office, a thick folder of evidence on the desk between us. The DEA, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, reviewed the documentation with methodical precision, screenshots, video recordings, audio transcripts, and statements from witnesses who'd seen the original incident. This is remarkably thorough, she said, closing the folder. Most cases of false reporting don't come with this level of documentation. Usually it's one person's word against another's. She recorded herself confessing to filing a false report and published it online, I replied. I didn't have to do much investigating. The DA nodded, tapping a finger on the folder. What outcome are you hoping for here? Maximum charges could result in 6 months jail time, substantial fines, and a permanent record. I leaned forward, choosing my words carefully. I don't want her in jail. I don't even want her to have a permanent record if that can be avoided. What I want is for her to understand that actions have consequences. Real ones, not just likes and comments. You're more generous than most spouses I see in this office, the DA observed. This isn't about revenge, I explained. It's about justice and education. She genuinely doesn't seem to understand that what she did was wrong, let alone criminal. I'm hoping the legal system can provide the wake-up call that friends, family, and I haven't been able to deliver. After further discussion, we agreed on a path forward. The DA would open an official investigation, including a formal interview with my wife about the incident. Depending on her cooperation and attitude, they might offer a diversion program instead of pressing full charges, community service, legal education classes, and probation that would keep her record clean if she complied. I left the meeting with a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that action was being taken, guilt about potential consequences for someone I had once loved, and anticipation of finally resolving a situation that had consumed my life for a month. 3 days later, the official notice arrived at our home, a formal letter requesting her presence for questioning regarding allegations of filing a false police report. I was in the kitchen when she opened it, watching as the color drained from her face. "What is this?" she demanded, waving the letter. "Did you do this?" I kept my voice level. "I spoke with the district attorney about what happened, yes. You're actually trying to have me arrested for a joke?" Her voice rose with each word. "What is wrong with you?" "It wasn't a joke. It was a crime," I said, repeating the phrase I'd said so many times now. And I specifically asked them not to pursue arrest. I suggested alternatives that would help you understand the seriousness without giving you a criminal record. "You had no right." She was shouting now, tears forming in her eyes. Not from remorse, I realized, but from anger and fear of consequences. "This could ruin my life." "The arrest you staged could have ruined mine," I reminded her calmly. "All I've done is present the truth to the proper authorities. The consequences are the result of your actions, not mine." She stormed upstairs and I heard drawers slamming as she presumably packed a bag. An hour later, she left without another word. Through mutual friends, I learned she'd gone to stay with her parents, ironic, given her father's support of my position. 2 days passed without contact. On the 3rd day, I received a call from her father. "She's meeting with the DA tomorrow," he said without preamble. Her mother and I convinced her to cooperate fully. I've also arranged for her to consult with a defense attorney, a former colleague who won't sugarcoat the situation. "Thank you," I replied sincerely. "I'm sorry it came to this." "No," he said firmly. "I'm sorry she put you in this position. The girl who did this isn't the daughter we raised. Something's changed in her, this obsession with internet fame, with pushing boundaries for attention. It's not healthy, and it needs to stop before she does real damage to you or to herself." The following week, I received an email from the DA's office confirming that my wife had attended her interview and been formally charged with filing a false police report. As we'd discussed, they'd offered a diversion program, 100 hours of community service, mandatory classes on legal ethics, and 6 months probation. If she completed everything successfully, the charges would be dismissed without a permanent record. She'd accepted the offer. That evening my phone rang, her number on the screen for the first time in over a week. I answered, unsure what to expect. "I met with the DA," she said, her voice subdued. "They showed me the evidence, all of it, the videos, the recordings, of me planning more pranks, the officer statements." She paused, and I heard a shaky breath. "I didn't realize. I never thought about how it looked from your perspective, or the legal perspective." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard, but I recognized it wasn't actually one. She was sorry she was facing consequences, not sorry for what she'd done to me. "What happens now?" I asked, already knowing my own answer to that question. "I'm staying with my parents until the community service is complete. Dad thinks it's better if we have some space." Another pause. He also suggested I talk to a lawyer about divorce options. "I think that's wise," I said quietly. "I've already consulted with one." The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of a relationship broken beyond repair. Not by my actions at the DA's office, but by her choices a month earlier. "I never meant for it to go this far," she finally said. "It was supposed to be funny." "I know," I replied, and found that I actually believed her. She hadn't set out to destroy our marriage or risk criminal charges. She simply hadn't considered the consequences of her actions, a failing that the legal system was now addressing in ways I never could. 6 months after that fateful evening when police officers handcuffed me in my own driveway, I sat across from my attorney in her office, reviewing the final divorce settlement. The terms were remarkably favorable to me, a direct result of the documented evidence of my wife's actions and their legal consequences. "All you need to do is sign here," my attorney said, sliding the papers across her desk. "Once she countersigns, we'll file with the court. Given the circumstances, I don't anticipate any delays in processing." I stared at the signature line, pen hovering above it. This wasn't how I'd imagined my marriage would end. Despite everything, there was still a hollow ache where love had once been. "You did everything right," my attorney said gently, reading my hesitation. "You didn't seek revenge. You sought justice through proper legal channels." The consequences she faced were proportionate and rehabilitative, not punitive. I nodded and signed my name, officially ending 3 years of marriage marred with a few strokes of ink. In the months since the DA intervention, my wife had completed her community service at a local crisis center for victims of domestic violence, an ironic but fitting assignment given the nature of her false report. According to her father, who had maintained contact with me throughout the process, the experience had been genuinely transformative. "She's working with people who've been truly victimized," he told me during one of our occasional lunches. "Hearing their stories, seeing the real impact of domestic violence, it's changed her perspective on what she did." The divorce proceeding itself was straightforward. Her lawyer made no attempts to contest the division of assets or the terms regarding our shared property. There were no children to consider, no complex financial entanglements to unravel, clean, simple, final. As I left my attorney's office that afternoon, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Not just the burden of the legal process, but the emotional toll of living with betrayal and its aftermath. For the first time in half a year, my future stretched before me unencumbered by the past. That evening, I returned to what was now solely my home. The house had transformed over the past few months as I gradually reclaimed the space, new furniture in the living room, a completely redesigned home office, fresh paint throughout, physical changes that reflected the personal transformation I had undergone. My phone chimed with a message, a text from my former father-in-law, papers signed on her end. "Thought you should know. Take care of yourself, son." I smiled at the son part. Despite everything, he'd become something of a mentor during this ordeal, a source of wisdom and perspective when I needed it most. We'd continue our occasional lunches even after the divorce was finalized, an unexpected positive outcome from an otherwise painful chapter. As I settled onto my couch with a glass of wine, I reflected on everything that had transpired. The false police report, the public humiliation, the methodical gathering of evidence, the DA investigation, the divorce proceedings, each step taken not in anger or vengeance, but with clear-eyed purpose and adherence to legal processes. My phone chimed again, this time a notification from a professional networking site, a job opportunity in another state, one that matched my qualifications perfectly. I'd updated my profile months ago, curious about options beyond my current position, beyond this town where neighbors still sometimes gave me questioning looks despite the truth being widely known. The timing felt right, a fresh start professionally to complement the fresh start I'd created personally. 3 weeks later, I accepted the position and began planning my relocation. The house sold quickly, well above asking price in the current market, another piece of good fortune that felt like the universe balancing scales that had been tipped against me. On my final weekend in town, I had lunch with my former father-in-law one last time. "She asked about you," he said as we finished our meals. "Wanted to know if you'd be willing to meet before you leave." I considered it briefly before shaking my head. Some chapters need to stay closed. Tell her I wish her well, and I mean that sincerely. He nodded, understanding. What she did was wrong, criminally wrong. But the experience has changed her. The community service, the legal education classes, the therapy she started afterward. She's not the same person who thought a false police report would make entertaining content. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, and found that I truly was. I'd never wanted destruction or punishment, only justice and growth. That's why I went to the DA instead of social media with what I knew. The legal system is designed to rehabilitate as well as punish. We parted with a firm handshake and genuine goodwill. Another chapter closed with dignity rather than drama. As I drove away from my old hometown the following morning, sunrise painting the sky ahead of me, I felt no regret for how I'd handled the situation. I hadn't sought revenge through the same underhanded means she'd used against me. I hadn't stooped to public humiliation or emotional manipulation. I'd simply presented the truth to the proper authorities and allowed the legal system to function as intended. The ultimate revenge, I realized, wasn't revenge at all. It was justice, properly served. Justice that protected my reputation, addressed the wrongdoing, and ultimately created an opportunity for personal growth on both sides. Sometimes the most powerful response to being wronged isn't matching the offense, but transcending it entirely, not through forgiveness alone, but through a commitment to proper processes, to truth, and to your own integrity, even when others abandon theirs. My new life awaited, unencumbered by bitterness, strengthened by adversity, and built on the foundation of knowing I'd faced injustice with justice, not vengeance. And in that, I found peace.